tie that in, and I think part of my question was, and I've heard this in class, this isn't the first time that we've talked about this, but when you say we are the universe, so we have the universe term for stars and
Well,
science, but you've also expressed, and I'm not saying just because you say it, I just go
yeah,
with it,
no, but the
but I
reason,
feel it too.
yeah, no, the reason I would say that, Jerry, that we are the universe is very likely it had to be in response to something because I don't really talk that way. But, while it is reasonably accurate and we can look at things that way, sometimes it's just another trap. And it starts to create division and separation. And that's probably why I was saying that we are the universe, is because somebody was probably saying the universe has my back, or the universe is looking out for me, or the universe this, or the universe that. And did you notice they're using it's the same thing. It's God. It's a person or some sort of entity that is thinking, that is in control and can give you stuff or take stuff away. That's human characteristics. Don't you see? No, we aren't separate, and that's a wonderful way of talking about things. But it's also pretty abstract, and it's not really beneficial to our practice necessarily. It's better to feel non-separation than to just talk about it. When we just talk about it, we get Facebook, Facebook spirituality. I'm in a spiritual group that it's just I don't even want to look at it. Like it's just ugh, just it's like we're not going anywhere with this shit. It's just the same old, same old. So yes, Jerry, we aren't separate. But if I was saying that, it wasn't to indulge the infinite nature. It was very likely because I'm countering this idea that the how can the universe have my back? I am the universe. That's probably why I said that, Jerry. Does that make sense? So I usually do not talk about the universe in that way. We are the universe. Well, so this is the way
I'm
that
just tying in. I'm tying in. We don't have to go down this path,
it's an okay path. I don't mind.
require this. It's
So,
just I like that
but
when you say we are
let's
attention.
we are
We
attention,
can't.
but let's use the proof. So
Yeah.
the proof is I have never had a moment in my life where I was not attention. I have no experience without attention, right? I have never had a moment without attention. I have had a moment without this pen. So fundamentally, if I can exist without the pen, I am not the pen. Do you see what I mean? But then again, since I am the whole universe, in a manner of speaking, I am the pen. But that doesn't do me very good when I want a writing utensil. I can't just use my finger because I am the whole. I need the fucking pen. So we have to have a way of talking about this in a finite way, and if we want to, I would rather just experience it as the seer than talk about it as whatever we're talking about. And that's what I'm constantly running up against in the island of the practical. People still just want to talk about shit. We don't want to actually experience it because that requires more than just reading something and being like, wow, that sounds good. No, there's something else required. We have to engage the world around us. We have that God factor to where we can direct attention. So here's the geometrical proof, Jerry. You have never been out. You have never not been in this universe, right? Is that true or false? You've always been in this universe, even
Yes.
even your particles before you were a physical structure. You've never been removed from it. So how can we say that you are not it? So do you see what I mean? You are it. It is you. There's no real discernible difference. But then again, talking about that doesn't do us a lot of practical good. And that's what people are confusing. They keep taking something that just really isn't very practical to work with, and they're just trying to force it into their cognition. I don't recommend that. I recommend feeling the oneness, feeling the God, feeling source, as opposed to just talking about it and trying to put it inside of the box that we call language. Does that make sense?
Totally agree. Totally.
So no, source does not evolve. There's no evolution to source because the moment we do that, now we have levels. Now it's deeper and higher and lower and more. And if we use the word source, we're talking about the infinite. Show me higher vibration on the scale of the infinite. We're just using the human perspective and we're making the whole universe into a human being. Now we have a person that's judging their opinion from right and wrong. And now this person who is an omnipotent, all-knowing, well, if you're all fucking knowing, what's this whole Satan thing and this whole, now I gotta die? Well, didn't you see that shit coming? No, but we have free will. That doesn't make any sense. Like we're just making shit up. We're just essentially taking the universe and turning it into a human being. And I just don't see that. I don't feel that, I can see whatever I want to see if I say it to myself enough, but I don't feel it. And I don't think most people do. Yes.
Ernest, everything is changing all the time. And with doing this practice, you can feel that more and more. So if everything's changing all the time, it
Mm-hmm.
seems crazy that human beings would stay stuck in a repetitive cycle or repetitive thought pattern first and then a cycle or vice versa. That seems crazy when everything is changing. So some people will evolve and other people won't if they stay stuck. If they don't allow their thoughts to change as well with everything else that is changing. It seems like it's like that pipe, like a human being could be like that pipe that doesn't allow the flow to go through it. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. Yeah. No, I really like the way you put that. That makes sense to me. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think I have much to add to that. That's pretty much right on. Well, there was a point, I think, but it's gone now. But yeah, Ida, I really like that. So sometimes we look at thinking as the evolutionary factor, like our thinking needs to evolve. So let me back this up a second. I'm talking about changing with the environment. That is Darwin. The species must be able to change to its environment, internally and externally. Agreed? That is the definition of evolution. If an elephant cannot change to its environment, then genetically, biologically, psychologically, it will not evolve. It will not change over time.
And will cease to exist?
Well, possibly. Or it will change, the species will have to change, or yeah, I think cease to exist. If it can't adapt, it will change. The elephant will no longer be a species. No, that's true. That's accurate as we've seen it in ecosystems. Right? So how can we adapt to a present moment around us and inside of us that we are oblivious to? Mike, how can we change and adapt and move if we are not paying attention? If we're lost in thought, how can we move and adapt and change with the present moment rather than trying to control and resist it? So the evolutionary factor isn't really the evolution of mind, although that is something we could talk about for sure, Ida. You're right. Minds that are clinging and that's starting to get a little bit philosophical, a little bit, well, maybe not philosophical, but we're getting into cognition, the thinking. But let's go outside of cognition and thinking for just a second and just basic adaptability, our ability to adapt to our own bodies when we have injuries or when we're not feeling well, when we're not, maybe eating the best, or maybe we just ate something and it's just not settling well and our body isn't in that prime condition because we're biological, so we're not always going to be there, right? So the adaptability factor is directly proportional to a mind that is not resisting the present moment. If we're in an act of resistance, we cannot adapt. And someone will say, well, okay, show me. Look at the world. How many people flipped shit because they had to wear a fucking mask? Like, this isn't even the viruses we see on TV, but it is statistically probable that the human species is going to experience a virus. Maybe we can have technology that somehow we can nip that in the bud. But every species on Earth, if it overpopulates, you will start to see cancers. you will start to see sicknesses, you will start to see diseases, and the more it populates, the more the disease passes, the more the disease passes, the more the disease mutates, the more the disease mutates. Now the disease is evolving, it's changing over time, even though it's technically not alive, as they like to say with viruses, because it's exact replication. No, not until it mutates. A mutation is not exact replication, hence it is alive. So I would be very happy to argue that. But does that make sense? So if we want to evolve in the Darwin sense physically, look at how thought has made our physical bodies unable to adapt. We don't move very well. Our bodies start to get weak, and we start to get overweight, and our bones get less dense. Why? Because of the way you're eating, because of the way you're drinking, because of the way you're interacting with your life experience. Why? Because the way that you're thinking. It's so obvious, isn't it clear? It's so clear. It's just like there it is. So no, our species, our human species is not evolving. We're not changing over time. We've gone so much into changing the environment to suit us, but we can only do that to a point. We're only going to be able to do that to a point because we still require air to breathe, water to drink, energy to transfer, food. So there's no reason to believe that we can exist without the Earth. Even if we were able to travel through space, we came from this planet. There may be aspects to our biology that we don't understand yet that is intimately tied to this planet. So no, we're not evolving as a human species. The human species is becoming less adaptable. If we don't have our things, our stuff, and our music, it's like, oh, we don't have our sports, we don't have this, we can't function. We're like, oh my God, we got to get back to normal. What does normal sound like to you? Stagnant, not changing, clinging, attaching, attempting to control. What does that lead to? It leads to make America great again. So no, I'm not interested in any of that. So the expression of Tao is evolution. Tao itself is not evolving. It has all. It can't. You see what I mean? It is the it is. Evolution is contained within the infinite source. So no, source is not evolving. It's already evolved, and there is no evolution. And it's already infinitely expanded. It is the it is. It's still moving, and that movement is an expression. And that movement creates change, and that change is an expression. Does that make sense? Everything is an expression of Tao, and we are it, Jerry. We're more an expression of Source, and so is the universe. That's how we are the universe. But no, every thought you have is not interacting with a star necessarily in every universe around. Do you see how that doesn't even make sense? They're taking the terms of quantum entanglement and just making it into some abstract philosophical statement that can't be supported in the physical experience. And then it's like, that's totally true and completely unfucking helpful.
It might be unhelpful. Again, I already expressed why I posted that, but there's a part of that I do hold to. I do think.
Do you see that sentence? Look at the sentence. I do think.
I said I do hold to that.
Because holding to it is a thought. So you have a thought about it.
Well, I mean, the concept of that, as far as energy goes,
is great, but it's not particularly helpful. The only way that it would be helpful is if it's interrupting repetitive streams of thought. But you could do that with the word pen, or you could do that with, I think that meerkats are sexy. That will still interrupt the repetitive, but you could also replace it with, I am the entire universe experiencing itself as a human. Or what did the post say, Jerry? What was it again?
Something about
the stars and okay, yeah. So maybe Ida is like, oh man, like I feel so disconnected. Wait a second, I am the stars, and every thought I think interacts with. Now that has created some space, so I would say it has value. But work with that principle. So start changing some. Work with. Show me. Yeah, I love the concept, and we can, and that's why I say, yeah, that's there, and I'm acknowledging that concept. Words can interrupt repetitive thought, but what happens if you start thinking that all the time, Jerry? What happens if that thought, that concept, becomes an imbalanced one? What will occur?
Suffering.
Yeah.
And I don't think that, but I do hold the belief that whether I'm aware of it or not, I am energy and I'm putting stuff out every day. And if I'm not managing this in a deliberate way, well, it's no wonder I've got chaos in my life, or my body is not well, or all these things you just said. We're creating every day. And if we're not doing it deliberately, consciously, then I don't know, we're just a leaf at the mercy of the wind stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just saying, I do feel like on some level, I'm aware that, yeah, I'm creating my own environment.
On some level.
All right.
Show me that level. Like, what are we talking about now?
I'm just saying, I don't wake up every morning and say, my gosh, this conversation I'm having with you is reverberating all through the planets and the universe, and it is affecting everything in the whole. And, you know, on some level, it might be that's not what I'm suggesting, but I do believe the energy of us as the it.
What do you do with that belief? Do you tuck it in the corner of your mind and let it disappear? How is that belief manifesting? Like, what are you doing with the belief right now?
What I'm doing with that right now is I'm here in class and I'm working on my practice, because I know at the end of the day, that's the best thing I can do for myself.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm not being more deliberate with me, then I'm just missing the world around me every day.
Yeah. I'll cut to the chase. This practice goes beyond belief. If your beliefs are not required for this practice, when you get to the seer's training, there's no, I don't have to believe you. You don't have to believe me. I'm experiencing what you're saying. So if I say I am the whole universe experiencing itself as a human being, that is a belief. That is a word concept, a cluster of words, right? And it can interrupt the stream of dialogue. That's one thing it can do. But what am I describing? Why am I even saying I am the entire universe experiencing itself as a human being? Belief is only so valuable. I don't need belief. It's cool, but I don't need it. So I was born without belief, folks, and I won't. When I die, it's not, or when I transition to something new, it won't be steeped in belief, because I'm there. I can feel it. It's experience. You know, that's usually when belief starts to fall away, and you know, we have that moment, see the light and everything else. So this practice goes beyond belief, it goes beyond words, it goes beyond concepts, and it goes into experience. So if I want to feel like I'm the entire universe experiencing, so I'm describing a feeling, right, Ida? If we make up those words and those concepts, it's to describe a feeling. If we say that my mind can affect, it's to describe a feeling, perhaps, of oneness, of universal I am the I am. Now, if you're feeling that now, it is actualized. There's a big difference between what is actualized, what we're feeling, what we're connecting to, and belief. Now,
It's personal power feeling
the
can be
personal,
that,
yes,
but it can be other feelings as well. When I
yes,
think about that, that's is an excitement to me.
me too.
You know, that connection, that feeling of wow, I've got all this at my disposal.
Yes.
But you know, like Jerry says, on an everyday, you're not running about zapping things and using your power, you know,
Yes.
like a wizard. But really, you can feel it as a
Now,
feeling.
and I'm just going to ask though, Ida, if you were in severe psychological suffering, what does that very likely mean?
It means you're in a panic and
Thinking,
and
thinking,
trying
thinking,
to
thinking.
control and sort out. And, you know, there's no space there, there's no peace.
Hmm. And so that thinking is probably expressing beliefs, correct? very likely.
Yeah, probably. Yeah,
I'm not good enough, I can't do this,
or
or,
this has
they're
happened
wrong.
before and
This
it's
is
going to happen again. And
yeah, yeah. So those are all beliefs, they're words, they're concepts, and so we start to we say these things because that's how we're feeling, and then how we're feeling creates more saying it, and then before you know it, we're saying it to ourselves all the time, and we're believing it. So, Ida, in that example, would it be valuable to use belief, or do you think that we should reject belief? So one mind is
if
steeped
it's
in belief.
useful, use it.
If it's useful, use it.
If it
Right.
makes you feel good, use
If it
it
makes you
in
feel
that
good,
moment.
use it.
Yeah.
Perfect. That's what I was getting to, Jerry. If we can use it to find a feeling, then it has value, such as creating space in the repetitive cognition, or somehow pointing to the moon. I'm not just going to look at the book that says look at the moon. I'm going to actually look at the moon. And now I feel the connection and what it was attempting to describe. Now I feel it. That's the key. That's what we're getting out of this practice, is that feeling of connection, not just belief. So if if Ida is in severe psychological suffering, she's very likely thinking a lot. Belief is thinking. So we can use belief as a tool, right? And it can be valuable, and that's what I'm talking about with Jerry. But then there's a point. Seer's practice, I don't need belief. I don't need your knowledge. I don't need your information. I don't need your experience necessarily. I don't need those things. Where is my mind, and did I put it there? That's why I suck at secret societies that are trying to share secret knowledge. I don't need any of that. Most of that I can't prove anyway. It's just somebody told me that this, and the other thing, and it sounds true. And now I'm back into the same shit. No, where is my mind? I know that. Even if I'm in a computer generated matrix, Plato's allegory, I know the direction of my attention in this present moment. So I know that. And I know, as Jerry was pointing out, that I am the entire universe. And there's a feeling when that becomes actualized. That's why I use the word actualized. So we have a belief that can be very fucking abstract. How many Christians have beliefs? How many religious people, I don't want to pick on Christians, have beliefs? Are they doing it? Do they follow? No, because we're imperfect. We're sinful. It's okay, but yet it's not okay. And it's like, I'm so confused. It's okay, but it's not okay. I'm getting judged, but I'm not getting judged. Hate what God hates, but God is only love. And it's now, what the fuck are we talking about? Because we're not talking about anything. We're just making shit up. And that it can be valuable. The words and the concepts and the beliefs can have a place to a point. And this practice will go beyond that point. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you don't need a belief if you're in psychological drama and you're walking past a beautiful church and the doors open and you just feel the urge to go in and it's empty and you go and sit down. You don't need all the beliefs to get the feeling of the sanctuary or the relief of maybe the bustle of a crowd outside, or you can go in and kneel down and get the feeling of peace without the beliefs.
Yeah. No, you don't. You don't need beliefs. Beliefs, they can't. I mean, they have a purpose, right? We invented them. We created them. So, am I going to declare war on belief, Jerry? Does that make sense either? Does it make sense to declare war on belief and just reject it entirely?
No, but it's
But
like you said, beliefs can be a tool. And
yeah,
if I didn't believe that my thinking is the source of suffering, well, then I'm going to kind of miss this class. I
maybe,
absolutely
maybe.
believe that it is my thinking.
But it can actually go beyond belief because you can actually observe it. You don't know. You might have a breakdown, and in that breakdown, you're observing yourself, and you're like, "Oh shit, I see what's going on." And in that moment, you interrupted the repetitive habitual stream of dialogue, and then you're like, "Oh my gosh, it was because of my," and then you make the connection. So no, belief is not required. It can be, there can be a place for it. But if your belief isn't felt right now, it's abstract ideology. It only exists as a memory, a potential, a potential synaptic connection at that. That's all. Again, that has value. I like memory. There's a place for it. But if I don't feel the feeling from that stars and your words are to describe, but if we're not feeling the feeling, it's abstract ideology. It is not actualized. You can talk about peace, Jerry. Do you believe in peace? I would say
Yes.
I would say belief isn't required. I don't need to believe in peace. I can feel it. Belief isn't required. I don't need to believe it. I see it. I feel it. I know it. I am it. I don't have to put it in words. I don't have to tell you about it. Now, true, humans do like to express themselves and we like to share things. And so we do talk about it. And that is what it is. But don't have to. I mean, there's no principle in the universe that says I have to talk about what I'm experiencing. So if the words that describe can point to the feeling, that's why I use my mantras to do what? What do I use my mantra and my voice of power to do primarily? Is it to remember what I believe? What do I primarily do that for? What is the number one reason that I use words?
Communicate.
That's the number two reason.
In your mantra, you use it to point yourself back to the second ring,
Yes.
to the feeling.
Yes.
To the feeling.
So even before communicating to another person, I use words so that I can point back to the present moment. So my words will always point back to the second ring of power. What happens when we engage the second ring of power?
You don't need words then.
You don't need words then, but something else happens. We have another ring.
Oh, the third ring. Yeah.
Yeah.
The third ring. Right.
Yeah, I haven't heard you say it like that. I like that.
Right. So
Our words lead us to the second. I hadn't heard it like that. I like it.
Oh, that's my mantras. All my mantras point. So again, I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. So if you can say a belief and that creates space, Jerry, what would I say? Hell no, or what? No, of course. If it's working, yeah, do it. If it's working for you, fine. We'll talk more later. But when it's not working, then of course we'll have a conversation about why that's not working right now. So the words are an attempt to describe what? Experience. And where is experience? The second ring of power. So if I use words to point back to the second ring of power, I will feel the third. So if I were to use Jerry's meme to point back to that feeling that it's supposed to be, if it doesn't lead to a feeling, we're just talking shit. It is literally just talking shit. I don't care. I'm not interested in that. What am I going to do with that belief if it doesn't lead to a feeling? What am I talking about if I'm not talking about describing the human experience? Everything is a feeling. Your entire perceptive experience has been a feeling. It enters your eyeball. We perceive it. It creates a feeling. Sound enters our ears. We perceive it. The perceptive act is also a responsive thing. Sensory perception is responding to movement. That's the fundamental thing, and everything is moving. So we're always sensing in a manner of speaking. Mike, is this making sense? Do you kind of see why I don't really love all of the memes and all of the talking? Because if it's not pointing to the present moment, we are just talking shit. Still, it might be better looking shit but it's still shit.
Yeah. So we find a place of stillness and peace, and from there, that's it, all of it.
All of it.
And when engaging with that around us, we're keeping a point of attention so that we're not completely losing it into that other sphere, but we're holding on, having it within to that piece.
You cut out there just a little bit, but I think you were definitely heading the right direction. So
yeah, having a point of attention on that piece that we develop.
yes. Oh God, yes. Now you're really cooking, Mike. If you can feel the peace and place your attention on the peace will grow. That is not a belief. That is not words. That is not trying to control. You're paying attention to an aspect of yourself that always exists. Peace always,
Right.
that if we feel it, it isn't that inside infinity? We've just accessed it. We've just shined the light of our attention on something that a moment ago was unknown, and now it's known. That's what we're doing. That's the human experience. We're making the unknown known in a very relative way, but it's all already there. Infinity is already infinity. We just need to explore it. It's always moving and changing, so it's never the same thing in any moment, and that's why it's so fun. Oh, I'm sharing screen for a reason. What was I going to show you? Okay.
It
So
can be fun. It's certainly dynamic, Ernest. It certainly moves.
it moves. Everything is
And
in motion. Yeah, no, the universe itself is in motion, but it is motion itself. Do you see what I'm saying? I can't say the universe is in motion because now we have a universe separate from motion. Error. There is no universe separate from motion. The universe is in motion, but the universe has already infinitely expanded. It's always infinitely moving. Imagine a white wall that expands into infinity, but it's moving. That's why there's no such thing as empty space. Our mind made that up because we observe what we think is nothing. An empty room, for example, we say there's nothing in there. What? There's lots in there, but we know that now. We can light a match and we can see the smoke and it's moving and we're like, it's interacting with something. And then, now we have science experiments on what the fuck is going on in the air. What is this? Does that make sense, Mike?
yeah,
I'm trying to find my notes here because I did have this. These are the notes that, like, if this book was found, I mean, this is the nature of the universe. This is the questions that mankind has been asking. So what's mankind's purpose? To create. We are an expression of Tao. And what is Tao? It's moving, it's creating, it's changing. So what do? We do that. We doesn't that make sense? We do the exact same thing that everything else is doing. So purpose isn't your job, but your job is something that you're creating. So in a manner of speaking, it could be. Do you see what I'm saying? So yeah. But the bottom line is it all leads back to a feeling. If you're not feeling it, you're just talking shit. It's just a concept. So here we have what I call the infinite spark of awareness, of consciousness. Okay, and I'm going to explain this to you probably in a way that you've never heard it before. And you can tell me if it makes sense. And there's only so many ways that I can describe all the secrets of the universe, and you can take it or leave it. But I do have a description. I can explain it. Now, so what I'm showing you, all of this is source. Not one piece of it, it's all an expression of source. So I can't say that, God does that, it's all, it's all God. God can't do anything. It's all God. Do you see what I mean? Create is just movement. It's just change. But how is something changing, we would say is creation. So animals have the ability to have more animals. So in a manner of speaking, that is a form of creation. Does that make sense? Creation could be to put things together or take things apart. To express is a form of creation. That's a good question. Creation is a form of expression. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and do it. Fine. Sometimes I stay away from this type of thing because I'm about to tell you everything, like everything. And that sounds arrogant. I don't care. Here it is. This is the infinite spark. The infinite spark is the expression. It is the first expression of Tao. Tao cannot be named. It cannot be labeled. It is everything and nothing and all. So stop talking about it. You are it. That's fine. Okay, so Tao. The first expression of Tao. I call it the infinite spark. I didn't get that from anywhere. It came to me in a vision and as a feeling. So I'm calling it the infinite spark. The infinite spark is consciousness. Are you with me so far? The infinite spark is consciousness.
Yep.
Consciousness is not thought. Consciousness is not preference or feeling. Your brain is processing the world around you, and you will always feel that process. That process is a feeling. Light is entering your eyes, and we feel that. We taste it, we feel it. Sometimes we use the word feeling and emotion interchangeably. I do not. I can feel emotion, but I can also feel my physical body via my peripheral nervous system. Do you see what I mean? So feeling equal perception. Does that make sense? Fine. And if you don't mind, Jerry, I'm going to explain it how I'm going to explain it. I'll be very consistent with my words, and you can associate whatever you want to with whatever you want to. Okay? I do not associate consciousness with necessarily awareness, because the way that we use awareness in the island of the practical is a form of recognition. No, I do not associate consciousness with awareness. Awareness is a form of recognition. So you are in a room right now, Jerry, right? Is that correct? You are in a room, a space.
Yes.
Are you aware of absolutely everything in that room?
Pretty much.
The answer is no.
Well, no, I don't mean it like that, but I mean, it's kind of where I hang out. I mean,
But the answer is no.
okay. Okay.
Isn't there something you're unaware of in the room right now? Is there something you can't see? Is there a bed? Is there something under there? You don't know what's going on under there, do you?
Yes.
I mean,
know what you're saying.
we think we do, but I might have a mouse under my bed chewing on a wire for all the fuck I know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not aware of everything. Awareness, as we use the word, is a form of recognition. Does that make sense? I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but
Yes.
you asked the question. Awareness is a form of recognition.
Then let me ask a different way. Then would you define consciousness?
Here's consciousness. So consciousness is what I call the infinite spark, or the first expression of Tao. And I have to use words very loosely. First. There's no first on the scale of the infinite, guys, but here we are with these binary brains, so let's just talk about it. So the first thing I would like to talk about in relation to the expression of the infinite that we can't talk about, right? We can't talk about the infinite, Jerry, right? We can't. But we can talk about its expressions. Do you see what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. The first expression is consciousness. Consciousness is not necessarily recognition. Consciousness is not necessarily awareness. Consciousness is definitely not necessarily thought. Okay? Consciousness is the infinite spark. It's all pervasive, it's all through the universe, and stop trying to understand it because it's way too close to Tao to put into words. Does that make sense? Are you good with this, Mike, so far? I'm not asking you to agree. Do you understand my terms and definitions so far?
Yes.
Okay. I am not trying to convince anybody of anything. I am not trying to tell you what to believe. And I don't want this to sound arrogant, but I can explain the universe to the extent that it can be explained. And
Well,
I'm not sorry for that, Mike. I mean, I can define my terms and I can explain it. If you want to agree, fine. If you don't want to agree, fine. The more you do the practice, it will reveal itself. I can actually tell you these things, but I can actually show you where to see them if you're willing to pay attention, and that's the practice. If we pay attention, these things will be revealed to us. So the universe opens up like a flower. Okay, so here we are. We have the Tao. I am never going to talk to you about the Tao. That is infinity, infinitely expanded, infinitely existed. We cannot talk about it. Our brains do not process the unknowable. The Tao is the unknowable. It's the only unknowable. Does that make sense? It's the unknowable. The first, and I can talk about the expressions of Tao. Anything I'm ever talking about is the expression of God. I don't talk about God itself. Do you see how I fuck up? The moment I start to talk about it, I create separation and I fuck it up. That's why you shouldn't try to talk about it. That's why the Tao said the Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao. We have seers trading. We will feel Tao. We will experience it. We will actualize what we're talking about. The belief is to point to something, a feeling, an experience. We'll feel it and experience it. The belief will no longer be required. The belief is a tool. It can be valuable. We can share our experience creatively and artistically and things like that, and that's great. But the fact that God is a belief means that we have fallen very far away from the engagement of source. Right, Jerry? We're so far away from connection in the human experience that we have a separate word for God. And now God is a thinking, believing, aware brain type thing that's judging and labeling and creating and controlling, and now we can ask stuff and give stuff and thy will be done, and now we have will. And so God is a term for me for the word infinite. Infinite, we can use all of these words interchangeably: God, Tao, infinity, earnest, in a manner of speaking. Now I would use earnest really to define this. So if I use the word earnest, I'm talking about the cup. And that's okay. That's an aspect of Tao, is earnest. But the first aspect that I would talk about is consciousness. Are we okay with that so far? And you don't have to agree with me. I just want to know if you understand what I'm saying, and then we have communicated, and then you know at least where I'm at.
Okay, you just said it again. And
Consciousness is an expression. It's the first expression that I would talk about because it's the base, right? Why am I going to talk about the top of the building if I'm trying to teach you how to build a building? Wouldn't I first talk about the base of the building?
consciousness is
The first expression that I will talk about from source. So
and you haven't defined it yet. You're getting ready to define it.
No, I'm not.
Oh, consciousness is human. Consciousness is
Humans are conscious, yeah. And consciousness is inside of the zipper. That's why Buddha said everything is conscious. But we do it, and we make consciousness a human trait. And now all of a sudden we're like, no, like this zipper's not aware of anything. So I'm going to explain all that though. But I just need to know. I just need to know if you're with me so far.
yes.
All right. So if I were to talk about the fabric, the base constituent energy, that energy is consciousness. It's not thought. It's not recognition. Does that make sense? At least how I'm explaining it.
Yes.
Okay. And I am going to remove all of the human characteristics so that this all makes more sense. But so this first arrow that I'm drawing to the center of the circle is the first expression, the infinite spark of consciousness. And I usually spell consciousness wrong. It's one of those.
That's Steve usually helps it.
Yeah, this doesn't have spell check, dang it. I'm reliant on spell check, I do admit. All right, so consciousness. Why won't I define? It's too close to source. I'm not going to try to define it. I am it. How can it define it? It cannot step outside of it. It cannot observe it in another it because it is it. They tried. The most wise sentence that I have ever read is the Tao that can be named is not the Tao, is not the eternal. It's not it. It's not all of it. Any word we use, any belief we have is a aspect. Jerry, we are every aspect of that in any way of speaking, and we know that. Cool. All right. So, do you see these little rays? These little lines coming from the infinite spark that I call consciousness? This is also consciousness. The direction of consciousness is attention. Now, here's the tricky thing, is that in order to direct consciousness, there has to be something to direct it. Now that's where we're getting different, right, Jerry? I have no reason to believe that this zipper is directing consciousness with attention. Attention is the direction of consciousness. It is directional. Everything is moving, right? Now, if I use the word attention, that is, I'm talking about how consciousness moves. As far as I can tell, and this could get a little bit into theory, a little bit into hypothesis. Well, it's more theory because I see it in the world around me. But as far as I can tell, a complex structure is required to direct, to point consciousness as attention. Does that make sense?
Consciousness doesn't require us. If we aren't here,
Correct.
consciousness still exists.
Yes. So does attention, because I'd like to think that a squirrel is still paying attention to nuts, right? A bird is still paying attention to whatever the fuck birds pay attention to. So no, without the human species, consciousness still exists, and attention still exists. Attention is the direction of consciousness. Now, the direction of this as consciousness is it doesn't have that brain structure. It doesn't have that complex structure. The interesting thing is that the universe as we see it is a very complex structure. So I do prescribe to the idea that there is a universal consciousness, a universal attention, but that does not mean universal thought. That does not mean universal perception. Perception is the processing, and I'll get into that. So are we good? Are we good with the term so far?
Yes.
The universal consciousness that you speak of, we are it.
We are it. Absolutely. But don't you notice though how human beings want to take that and now we have a decision-making universe? Do you see that? We take the human brain and what we're experiencing and we put that on the infinite. And that is a syntax error of the millennia. That is one of the biggest syntax errors that human beings have ever made, was to take what we're doing with our brain and our experience and making that into this universal thing. And now we have religion, we have a man that's judging us. And I know most of us here don't believe that. And if you do, I mean, I guess I don't know if that's true or not. So that's a belief and you're allowed to have those. But I don't hold that belief. I don't need it. Island of the practical. What does that mean? That's the world. I use the term island of the practical to describe ordinary life experience.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Just what you were saying. You said now we take our brains and decide, we have religion.
Let's do that then. Let's talk about that next. So now we have, you see these lines coming off of this, Jerry? I'm going to make this one longer. I'm going to make this line a little bit longer. So this is still the infinite spark, the direction of consciousness. It's moving. It's always moving. Everything is moving. This is the fundamental constituent of the universe. It is always moving and it is always directional, and I would call that directional attention. Okay? So a bird has attention. A worm has attention. Technically, the pen has attention, but it doesn't have any way to direct it. Therefore, it has no animated life force. But we're about to get into that. We're about to get into chi and things like that. Okay, so here is a lens. Can you see the lens, Jerry?
Yep.
All right. Here's where it gets a little bit where I can only go from what I see and, deduction, and a little bit of this is belief, and that's okay. And a little bit of it is observational. So I observe that in order to direct attention, as far as I can tell, it needs a brain or a complex structure. We have 1 trillion times 1 trillion synaptic connections, and the universe itself looks a lot like a brain. Now, I'm not going there. That's where I will stop. So does that make sense so far?
Yes.
Okay, we're having fun. Okay. And Jenny popped in just to see what we were talking about. I am recording though. I might be careful with this one though, because I'm explaining all the secrets of the universe, and sometimes people don't like that. So I think of it like a radio frequency of everything, and the human brain is dialing mechanism. Sure, I like that. No, that's perfect. I like that analogy. Is that analogy or a simile? That's a simile because you use the word like a radio. I appreciate that simile. My son taught me the difference between simile and analogy. Now, when it goes through this, pew, pew. Oh no, I wanted that to be a different pew. Pew. And then pew. And then pew. And then pew. Everything is flowing through this lens. And now that lens is directing the direction of consciousness and Tao and everything. Doesn't this all make sense? All right, so we have consciousness going through the lens of the human brain. Well, no, this lens doesn't have to be the human brain. Okay, this lens could be that universe. There could be a universal lens. I'm okay with that. And I'm pretty sure it's not judging me, labeling me, trying to control me, because I doubt that it's creating all of that psychological suffering. I just doubt it. All right, so we have consciousness, we have the infinite spark, and now this is where awareness will come in. Because now let's just assume for argument's sake that this is the human brain so that we can talk about it a little bit more. Because I don't know about bird brains. I think birds are pretty smart as far as I can tell. But so let's say the lens is the human brain. I also want to emphasize it's not just the brain, but it is also our body. The brain and the body are focusing and directing the lens of consciousness itself. Now enter awareness. And awareness is a form of recognition. Awareness and recognition occurs. And that is a result of the brain processing, storing memory, recalling memory, information. And by information, I mean bits of experience, not necessarily just words. Information is actually everything. Everything we could say is information because it's coming into our experience. We're receiving that information via sensory perception. So with the human brain, also with the dog brain, and then the worm brain, and then the bird brain, but we're all just doing it a little bit differently, right? Because we have different brains. And that's why I have no reason to believe that if there's a universal brain that it's doing the same thing we're doing, because we have a human brain that's binary. I have no reason to believe that the universal structure is binary. I have no reason to believe that. So it's something very likely that I don't understand. And I'm okay with that. Aren't you guys okay with that? I'm fine with other brain structures that I don't understand, because I can't see from their perspective. A bird is a brain structure that I can't understand. A worm, every life form on earth other than Ernest. So now we get into awareness, we get into recognition, we get into thoughts, we get into all of these different things. Does that make sense? The human brain is the focusing mechanism, the interpreting mechanism, and the selective mechanism, sure. I don't absolutely know that, Jerry, because they could have a language structure, couldn't they? And that language structure, they could be communicating to other birds, and that's a form of thinking.
I just was saying that I don't think they have so much anxiety.
I don't think they're thinking to themselves about an imaginary future.
Yeah, I don't think they have the suffering like we do.
No, because if they were anxious about the winter, they would just be paralyzed in anxiety and not preparing for the winter. I think birds are smart. I think bird brain isn't a very good insult, because I think birds are pretty smart.
Nature is smart.
And okay, intelligence. Let's back it up. Intelligence is the infinite spark. It is Tao. It is contained inside Tao. It is a part of the it is. It is. So intelligence itself is a aspect of Tao. It is not necessarily words. It is not necessarily, so that intelligence that is in birds, that is in all of geometry, all of nature, and we can access that intelligence when we're not resisting the present moment. Doesn't this make sense? It's like, oh. And so what we did is we could feel some of these universal aspects, and we did the same thing that humans always do. We think about it, and then we use words. And now all of a sudden, God is a man who is judging everybody and doing all of that shit. So we have awareness as a type of recognition. Attention is the direction of consciousness itself. We haven't gotten into the God, the God, what I call the God factor. I don't know what else to call this, but I could talk about that in a second. Yes, Donna, go ahead.
I have a question about how we're using the word intelligence. Am I correct in interpreting the way we're using the word intelligence as the effective use of those mechanisms without resistance?
I'm not
Focusing mechanism? How are we using intelligence? You just said, and then there's intelligence.
So and I will say, first of all, the closer that we get to Tao, the less we can talk about it, the less we're going to have definitions. And that's not an escape. That is, we have to feel it to really experience some of these things, and then we'll create new language maybe over time. I don't know, but the language doesn't really exist yet.
I get that. It's just that that was the last term you were using in this explanation, and I wasn't clear on how we're using it here.
I would look at intelligence as, let's see, I recently read a definition of it, but it's kind of like the movement in the most efficient manner possible. So we could look at intelligence as a type of efficiency. We could. What it's not is information. It's not necessarily words and memory. Intelligence is not necessarily memory. Memory is a form of intelligence, but so is molecules. Intelligence as infinity and infinite, yes. Mm-hmm.
So intelligence is the utilization of our consciousness without resistance.
If we are not in an act of resistance, then the infinite and the finite will make a connection. And there will be a flow between what we perceive as finite, earnest, and what we perceive as infinite, Tao, God, Source. So when that connection is there, there is no difference now between intelligence and the individual. The bridge has been crossed now. Now there's no discernible difference because of the flow. And it will look like efficiency. That's what it looks like to us. It looks like purpose. Not necessarily random accident. That's how it looks to us. And then that's why we would start to put human characteristics on it. So now intelligence is knowing what to do, in a circuit, and it could be in a manner of speaking because it's the most energy efficient, it's the flow. So I would say the closer that we get to flow, the closer that we're getting to feeling intelligence. I am not going to be able to give you a satisfactory definition. It's too close to source. And trying is how we end up with a bunch of the bullshit that we ended up with rather than just experiencing it. You've experienced intelligence, and that is the ticket. That's what it's all about.
So each individual, I was talking as a human when I asked the question, but I'm always talking as a human.
Okay.
But I was referring to a human when I asked the question.
Well,
but
that's actually helpful.
Any species level, I don't want to say level, any species experience of its intelligence has to do with the capacity it has to be without resistance.
Be without resistance.
And evolution
yes.
increases that capacity and therefore
It
the
can.
intelligence of that species.
Yes, it can. If that species continues to change over time, the evolutionary tendency is towards intelligence and source.
Okay,
and
okay, I
consciousness.
get how you're using intelligence. I don't want to get you too off track of where you were going. Thank
But
you.
but I still like intelligence from the human experience, because we're humans. So that's a good way to talk about intelligence. If we were going to talk about intelligence from a human perspective, which is really the only way we can talk about it, it is a mind that is not in resistance.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. And that's what the flow looks like. That's what the I just did that looks like. You make the catch without even a little bit of muscle memory, a little bit of working memory, a little bit of flow. Are we good so far?
I'm good.
And now we get into something that our brain can do. And that changes everything. And it is, so the way we use the word awareness, right? Awareness is a type of recognition. Are you with me?
Yep.
Because of the human brain, because of our human body and the way that our spirit moves through that structure. And I don't know all of the details, this is a part of the unknown, and we'll make it known as we go along as a species. We'll learn more. But then again, maybe we won't, because it's really not that important, not in the grand scheme of things, but we're curious. So sometimes we figure shit out because we're curious. And yeah. So ultimately, there is an individual, unique factor to the human experience that I don't know if it is occurring in other creatures necessarily. I am suspicious of dolphins and sharks and crows and other types of animals. I'm very suspicious of them. Not in a negative way, but I am suspicious that they're doing something I have the ability to do, and that is the awareness of Tao. I have no reason to believe necessarily that a squirrel is aware of its place in the grand scheme. It's just in the grand scheme. It hasn't contextualized, conceptualized, or, in a manner of speaking, the awareness of it. And we would call that self-awareness. Does that make sense? I know that I am the I am. I can feel that. Belief is not required. Belief is what we do to convince other people of things when they don't agree. Belief is what we do to convince ourselves of things when we don't agree. I do not need belief if I know. And there is a place for belief in the world. I have some, and they're subject to change. So the human being has something that I call free will, the ability to direct attention. And that is a result of our brain, our body, our spirit, the way it's flowing. That is actualization. Does that make sense? That is something that I don't see in everything, and it is nice. Any questions? Also, other things. Because of our brain, we can imagine things that aren't there. We can entertain psychological time. We can communicate with words. We can laugh. We think things are humorous. We have curiosity. We can find things curious. We're sexual. We can find things, sexual. So we have all of these things that we're capable of. But the number one thing that we're capable of, and this is the God factor, this is the Tao factor, is we can direct attention at will. That puts us in the seat of the architect and not just the creator, not just the abstract creator. A squirrel is creating based on biology mostly. Ernest is creating. It's not just biology. I am aware of my place in the universe. And that awareness can be felt. If you're not feeling it, no self-awareness is occurring. Okay. Now here's an important point, and I'm happy to stop here if this doesn't make sense. If any of this doesn't make sense, I'll stop here, because I am explaining the nature of the universe in its entirety. So Jerry, we have the ability to direct attention at will, and that is this practice. That's something that we came into this world able to do in full flow. And we take ourselves out of it in favor of thinking, in favor of thought streams, in favor of attempting to control, in favor of one type of cognition, thought, communicative thought. And that creates all of the disconnection, and we're no longer self-actualized. So, Jerry, you are either paying attention to the present moment on purpose, or you are in the present moment abstract, leaf at the mercy of the wind. So you are either creating unconsciously or consciously, correct? Or do you agree that you as a person, you're either doing that consciously, and so now we're starting to use words. So you're either aware of it or you're not. There's either recognition that you're doing it in the present moment, or there is no recognition that you're doing it in the present moment. Can we agree on that, all of us, before we move on? Do we all agree?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
That has a feeling, doesn't it? Doesn't this practice have a feeling when your attention is deliberate as opposed to default? Can't you feel that? That's what happens in the mind space, right?
Feel it a lot.
You can feel it a lot.
One is suffering and one is less suffering, because I don't know if I'm totally absent of it. But when I am in flow, there's no suffering. So it feels entirely different.
Or just being deliberate with your attention. Doing a single trick of attention feels different than being a leaf at the mercy of the wind, doesn't it?
It feels like less suffering.
Sorry, Donna.
Hopefully.
And then concentrating on the feeling, not concentrating, but feeling the feeling of the deliberateness.
What is concentrating?
Concentrating is focusing.
Focusing your what?
Focusing your awareness on the feeling of deliberateness. I've been doing that lately, and that feels even more deliberate.
What do you have to focus in order to gain the recognition of awareness?
What do you have to focus to gain recognition of awareness? Nothing, really. Attention. You just have to be present.
Attention.
The direction of your mind.
The direction of your attention. Right. So the direction of consciousness is your job. That is the purpose. Our purpose as human beings is to direct consciousness at will, free will. We are the architect. That is the architect factor. We have the ability to place attention deliberately, not just as default processes. Does that make sense? So we're not just biological default processes. We are not just processes of default social environment cues and triggers. We are also that. That's an aspect of Tao, isn't it? Isn't conditioning an aspect of Tao? Sure. It's all an aspect. So is hate. If we create that, that is now an aspect of Tao because we have created it. We have accessed it. We have risen it, shined our light on it, manifested it. So attention in the human experience can be on purpose, and that has a feeling. Can we agree on that? That has a feeling when your brain is on purpose as opposed to default.
Yep.
That's what it means to be human. That's what we can do. And that is what 99.9% of our species is not doing. At least not to any degree of accumulation.
You know, what's funny, Ernest, is the more I become present, the more I realize a lot of people aren't present, just like I wasn't present. And I'm not always present, but it's really interesting to note, and I'll end here, that when I'm talking to people, you could see they're not even hearing you. You know, they're totally distracted. It's really interesting to observe as I become more conscious myself.
And then look how we use these words, because we would say that, they're not paying attention, that they're not aware of what I'm saying.
Yes.
If their attention is not towards you, then they can't gain the recognition of what you're saying. They can't process it.
Exactly. What I felt is there's no connection between us. It's
There's
just
no
like,
recognition. Right.
exactly.
How can I recognize your words if I don't pay attention to them?
You can't.
I can't. So, Jerry talked about being able to manipulate stars. It was a meme. It was a nice one too. I didn't dislike it necessarily. But where's that feeling? Does it point to a feeling? And that's why sometimes I'm just not all that impressed by some of our memes on Facebook, because I don't see it directly pointing to the feeling. It's just kind of starting to get lost in abstract terminology, ideology, and there's so many, spiritual groups that's all I see. And I guess it has a place. I'm not declaring war on it, but it's all I see, because we're missing something. We're missing what I just very clearly broke down in today's class. So to direct attention means that we can determine recognition. What is deliberate modulation? Donna?
Choosing to align with the feeling of something.
Determining recognition. You're determining what you're recognizing by pointing your attention on what you want to see. And that's peace.
Right.
That's joy.
Right.
It's the feeling of connectedness. That's it.
Right.
That's all we're doing. So how do we get these feelings into our recognition, our experience? Well, we have to
We
pay
put our
attention to
attention
it.
there.
We put our attention there. It's that fucking simple. But if we put our attention on our thought, that will create emotion, and we will not have that God factor anymore. And human beings, sometimes they don't act as if they have a God factor. They get angry in traffic, they blame other people, we're comparing and contrasting and attempting to control, and now we're angry at people and judging people, and you're wrong and I'm right, and this is the way.
But the only way we can judge other, I was thinking of it when Jerry was making her example, which was very accurate about how she can sense when somebody is paying attention or not paying attention, and you're describing that same thing now.
Okay.
But I can feel it when I'm doing it more and more. I can notice it when I'm doing it more, even in class. I can feel when my attention is on, when I'm doing P1 and P2 and listening to you, when my focusing mechanism is 100% deliberate, and when it's 90% deliberate, and when it's 75%, like I can feel myself, and the feeling is more desired, the more deliberate I am with as much of my focus at any given moment as possible. I can feel that. And it's the same mechanism as observing other people doing it and not doing it. It's the same mechanism, except that now I'm focusing it on my own, which is really the only one I can control and the only one that requires my attention.
You know what I love too is when I notice somebody else isn't being present, it reminds me to be present. Am I being present? And it brings me back to me because I can observe how they're being.
You see yourself in it. You know exactly what's happening, and it's the same principles at play.
Yes, and just for the sake of clarification, I am going to differentiate my words. So awareness and recognition does not necessarily mean judgment. So discernment does not mean judgment. So I'm being very specific with my words so that we can communicate. Judgment is an opinion, a word-based stream of thought that is opinionated about something. So I can recognize that the road ahead is blocked by a tree. Logically, I know that I need to navigate that, and I don't have to think words. I can recognize that this is something that, it's a tree, and that's where I'm walking. So I'm able to infer, deduce, logic is possible, recognition possible, all of these things possible. And I have not necessarily judged it yet. I haven't added an opinion.
I talked to somebody about that the other day. They were saying they didn't want to be around somebody, and they felt judgmental. And I said, well, you're really judging or discerning, as you're saying, whether you choose to be around them or not. It's not like you're being harsh on them. You're choosing for yourself. That's another type of judgment.
It is
You know,
another
it's
type
not,
of judgment, yeah, because it's
yeah, it's a
opinion-based.
discernment, because it's important who you're around.
Mhm. Yeah. And there's a little bit of opinion in there too, and that's okay. Like judgments and opinions aren't the enemy. It's when we're out of balance and all we're doing is judging. Does that make sense?
Very much so.
Just going to mute you there, Donna. A little background noise. All right, so we understand judgment apart from recognition, because those are two different words. I don't use those words interchangeably. So if I'm judging you, that means I'm thinking a word-based thought stream about you. If I'm just recognizing that you're in my way and I can't get to where I want to go because you're standing there, that didn't necessarily require words or opinions. It's only when the words and opinions that starts to affect belief, and then before you know it, we're operating based on belief and not what we feel. And that's
Oh, wow. You just made me think of something. Even when you're discerning or looking at another, you don't have to use words. You just go by what you feel, and then you keep moving.
That's possible.
Hey, I like that. That's a good point, because if you get stuck judging, I will start judging the person instead of saying this is not for me, and with the feeling, and keep moving.
Mhm.
I like that. I'm going to keep that in mind.
Well, every thought will have an emotional derivative. So some people will use judgment to create an emotional derivative. For example, I'm better than they are. I would never do that. I'm more spiritual than they are. I'm zenned out. They're lower vibrational. Those are forms of judgment, and it's just inflating ego. It's inflating a sense of self, the cup. That's just an aspect of me. Why am I so attached to that?
Yes, I really get it. I really get it today.
So I'd like to focus on the feeling of deliberate. Does everybody know what I'm talking about? The feeling of attention on purpose has a feeling. Then again, we're not paying attention to it, but we can talk about it later. Abstract, automatic, acting out patterns, that has a feeling too. Habit has a feeling. And it's not good or bad necessarily. It's just, it feels different. And while I'm not going to declare war necessarily on habit, although I don't need any unconscious behavior, some of it still exists, like there's certain amounts of muscle memory and things that somebody may start to argue that it's habit, and fine, I don't really care. But it's, do I feel deliberate attention? So I don't have to focus on not doing something. I don't have to focus on not having habits. I have to focus on, what am I doing? Where is the direction of my attention? What am I recognizing in this moment as a result of the direction of my attention? So, the judgment and everything else, but the feeling of choosing a point of attention has a feeling. That is the God factor. That is free will. That is what personal power will help to produce. Does that make sense? That's what this practice emphasizes. That feeling of deliberate nature, the factor that makes us architects. It's one of the most wonderful things in the universe, as far as I could tell, and we don't even know it. We don't even talk about it. We're just too busy thinking about beliefs.
It's the X factor.
Gonna write that down. I just don't want it to sound too fancy, but that's nice. The X factor. All right. Any questions? Okay, bye, Karen. Donna, you're unmuted again. I didn't know if you had a comment to make or. Well, there you go. All the secrets of the universe. Where we are, where we came from. There's actually some things there that could be a little bit belief based, and you can do whatever you want with that. But yeah.
And then you're gonna have to stay in the left lane because you have, this
You keep unmuting, Donna, just so you know. It sounds like a riveting conversation, though. All right, that's all I got for you guys. Did you want to talk about anything else other than the nature of the universe, free will, what is God, what is life, what is purpose?
I think that's plenty to go on with.
Is that plenty? Okay.
I was just going to make a comment, kind of a question.
Sure.
I've heard you say this in the past, and I think you said it to me. Stop noticing. And with, just for an example, what Karen was talking about, when you're talking to people, you can tell that they're just not there. I mean, they didn't really hear your words, or, it's hard to say without sounding judgmental, which I'm not. But I've just heard you say, stop noticing. What she described, I noticed it. I noticed that. And I catch myself. I check back in. I deliberately choose not to add words to it in judgment. But I can feel it. I can feel when I'm around it.
Okay, I can give you an example. Let me use the restroom real quick, though, Jerry. I got to use the restroom real quick, okay? Give me just a second. Okay. It snuck up on me with a vengeance, but I'll be right back.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm back. So, Jerry, you want to finish that question? I think I get I get where you were going with it, but
Yeah, I don't think I need to give an example. It would just go completely sideways if I did. But I guess what I was just sharing or commenting on, that I am, there's that word, trying, but I find myself noticing what she described. And I think for me, I just keep reminding myself back to the practice, check back in. I don't need to sit and define this, contrast it, and start adding words to it. And then it just reminded me that every once in a while I'll catch myself saying that phrase that you had said to me, stop noticing. And so I kind of use it sometimes. I don't know how that's going to expand itself. You stop noticing, it stops showing up. Maybe that's part of the principle. I just wanted to share that I had heard you say that. And on some level, it kind of helps me get back to the practice. Maybe you want to define it?
Well, I don't know what I was talking about exactly. I can't remember, the specific example that you're talking about. But oftentimes when people are talking about mindfulness and they're talking about meditation, they're talking about just noticing everything. There's difference between noticing and engaging. Those are different words. Noticing is a form of recognition. Does that make sense? Noticing is a form of recognition. It's in your awareness in order for you to recognize it, right?
Yes.
Right. So what you're talking about, what's the word you're using again?
Just, you had said to me one
Notice.
time,
Notice.
stop. You know, what you said was stop noticing.
Yeah, and that might not have been the best way to say it, Jerry, because you can't not do something. So what I'm recommending is that we don't want to just notice. You know, Eckhart Tolle talks about the watcher. And so some people think that all I'm supposed to do is just sit here with no mind and just notice. No. No, I don't think so. I am the I am. I have this element that I call the God factor or the X factor, the human factor, although it's not just humans. I can direct my awareness. That's different than just noticing what comes into your field of perception. Does that make sense? I can notice all kinds of things, but do I hold my attention there? Or do I remove my attention? Do I move my attention? You know, was I present when I noticed? So notice is a form of recognition. Presence is not necessarily, you know, that's how we recognize, is to direct attention and to be present. So presence is when attention is directed on the present moment. And we can do that on purpose. And then you can start to recognize, and that's okay. But the trap is, like Shayna said, is when we start to get into thought streams about that recognition and what we notice. So if we notice something and we start thinking about it, we have errored. If we're just noticing, we could still likely be just a leaf at the mercy of the wind. Do you see that, Jerry? Do you see how you could be present right now? And you could be reasonably mindful right now. Let's say you're not met with impending doom right now. You woke up and everything's a-okay. And you're present and mindful presently, and you're just noticing. Does that sound good? It's like kinda, like that doesn't sound terrible.
Okay, I'm listening.
But you're still a leaf at the mercy of the wind. There's no third pillar active. So I don't recommend just stopping at the first and second pillar and hoping that that lasts and that has this somehow underlining effect, or that you're even going to stay there. You think just sitting in mindfulness and noticing is going to prevent the habit of judging what you notice? Judging what you notice, an opinion based thought stream about what you're noticing. Noticing is just noticing. You're not talking about just noticing. There's a form of thought around what we notice.
And that was my comment, was sometimes I've used that phrase, and you said maybe you didn't mean it in those two words, but I guess that was my comment, that I could relate to what Karen was saying. And I'm using that more deliberately lately to remind me to get back to the practice. I'm starting to add a little bit of words there, starting to contrast, just get back to the practice. I enjoyed the conversation. I had a meeting of the minds. Maybe that's okay. Back to the practice.
Yeah, and also sometimes what we're noticing is really just a projection of our mind and nothing that they're doing necessarily. That's why we got to be really careful with judgments, because they're opinions. So if I am present, I will notice things, correct? If I'm present and I'm mindful, I will notice things. Things will come into my experience and I will recognize them. Notice is a form of recognition.
Yeah, I think of the shopping cart example.
Right.
Like when you're eating healthy and you notice other people's shopping carts, it's when you go into those thought streams about judging their shopping cart and comparing and contrasting to your own shopping cart. That's where you fell into the trap.
That's the trap, right?
Just thinking your thinking is better.
Right. And to just sit and be present and mindful is not enough. I said it. There must be a third pillar to maintain it, and that is the God factor. That's the engagement factor. Jerry, does notice and engage sound like the same word to you?
No.
No, they're not. So if all you're doing is sit around noticing, I guess that's fine for now. I think that's a type of stagnicity. That stagnicity doesn't necessarily lead to connection. It could go right back to patterns of thinking, attempting to control, manipulate, and all of that good stuff. More judgment. The recognition or noticing is not a bad thing. That's going to occur. But if I have no third pillar active, I don't know where what I just noticed is going to take me. Do you see what I mean?
Yes.
A doing involved in engaging. Sure. Noticing can be a signpost, but what do you do when you read the signpost? It's typically a form of judgment. And that's okay too. I'm not declaring war on that. You notice how someone says, I don't judge, I'm not judging. Fuck off, you judge. We all do. We all have opinions about things. So just, it's existing in an extreme that we don't want. And so it's attaching to my beliefs and opinions. But I may have a judgment. It's fine. We don't have to, that's not a dirty word. It's only, that's a society thing, and I don't prescribe to that. So, but Donna, no, you can actually recognize something and you're not engaging. That is possible. If you're present and mindful, I can recognize that Shayna's cart is full of groceries. I'm not necessarily choosing my point of attention in that analogy or in that scenario. I'm not necessarily in that analogy. I'm just present and mindful, which is okay, which means I haven't started to judge yet. But I could recognize Shayna's shopping cart. That recognition, or what was the word? Noticing. That noticing is still not necessarily deliberate. Noticing is not a deliberate act necessarily. You might not notice something until it slaps you in the face. You may not notice the snake until it bites your hand. Noticing is a form of cognitive recognition that can occur and still not be deliberate. So I don't recommend just noticing. That sounds like just be the watcher. And it's like, no, I'm going to choose my point of attention, assume my position as an architect of the universe itself, and I'm going to step into the God factor. That's the thing. Do we step into the God factor or not? Stepping into the God factor is deliberate choice, deliberate nature. Where is your mind and did you put it there? We came into this world doing that in flow without trying to control. We just did it. We just knew how to do it. Noticing can be a signpost. It doesn't have to be. You can notice something and learn nothing from it. It doesn't point anything towards you. So notice, recognition. Signpost, attach meaning to that recognition. And that's okay. But that's two different things. Once we assign meaning, now it's a signpost. If it has no meaning, it's not a signpost of a fucking thing. Especially if we're not paying attention to how we feel. How we feel is a much better signpost. But even that, I noticed it. Don't you see how sometimes you say, I noticed it? It implies it sounds like you weren't very present. Now all of a sudden you notice that you were thinking because you weren't present in the beginning. Notice, very, very different than deliberate attention. If you're deliberate, you will notice. You'll still notice. But you may not be so likely to assign judgment or try to control. And it could be a signpost to you, for sure. How I feel can be a signpost. What I notice can be a signpost. It can tell me a lot about where I am and where I'm going in a manner of speaking. But ultimately, that feeling of deliberate is my guidepost. You see, don't you love the binary guidepost as opposed to the emotional scale? I don't declare war on the emotional scale, but I just need one thing. Am I going towards peace or away from it? That's my signpost. And you know what? That feeling of deliberate attention, well, that's my ultimate signpost. I don't need any other signposts than that. I can boil it all down to where is my mind and did I put it there? Is it deliberate or not? It is the lack of deliberate attention that is causing all of the human psychosis in the human experience. We stop paying attention to the world around us in favor of thought. We stop paying attention to the world inside of us in favor of thought. We no longer feel the third ring of power in favor of thought. Instead, we feel all of the emotion that we're creating as a derivative of thought, and we're feeling all of the frustration and the tangled web of what we're creating as a result of uninspiring behavior that's not in alignment with what we want. And how do you know what you want if you don't pay attention to the present moment? Impossible. I noticed the hole in the ground. That is a form of recognition. The light is bouncing off of that hole, is entering your retina. Your eyeball is processing that as a form of recognition. No word has occurred. You have not chosen to walk around it. You have not chosen to walk over it. You have simply noticed it, recognized it. To walk around it is a type of discernment, doesn't require words. The fox can walk around a lake without requiring words or judgment. It's a form of discernment. That is different. That is a cognitive process that is occurring that is slightly different than the act of recognition itself. Recognition is attention on something. And recognition doesn't even have to be a deliberate act. Not necessarily. The only choice that I'm aware of, Jerry, is where I put my mind. I don't know of any other choices.
She just said she noticed. She just said she noticed a hole.
Okay.
She can walk through the hole, or she can walk around it. It's a choice.
That choice could be a derivative of the things that she has learned so far. Why didn't she just fly over it? Why didn't she go under it? You know, so a lot of how we evaluate the whole and the choice that we make are relative to our experiences that we have created already, the experiences that are happening around us, those three factors that I talk about all the time. So the choice to walk around is a form of recognition and processing after the recognition. That processing doesn't necessarily require words, but it is a cognitive thing that's occurring that if you're damaged in your brain, you may not make that processing, and you just walk into the fucking hole even though you saw it, even though you recognized it as a whole. You didn't process what you need to do with it. How many people process that the cigarette's going to cause cancer? They know it, and yet they do it anyway because they're stuck in a habit. Same thing. So choice is a fickle thing, because is it choice? No animal is going to willingly injure themselves if there's no biological purpose. So is it a choice, or is it her biology of safety? I don't know. So the only thing that I know is a choice for sure. I only know of one choice for sure, Jerry. One choice for sure. Where is my mind, and did I put it there? Everything else could be a part of conditioning and programming in the human experience. And I'm actually okay with that too. That's fine. Again, I'm not trying to break the matrix. I don't even know what that means. I'm just creating within it on purpose. So I notice the whole. That's because I have attention. My attention is on the whole. A form of noticing happens. However, if you have never experienced a hole in your life, you don't know that you have to walk around it necessarily. Though we are pretty intelligent creatures, Donna, and I think we would be able to discern that, deduce that logic very quickly without words. But if you are a baby, how many times do babies do stupid shit that we would view as stupid because they have no contextual reference, they have no memory? And so they don't know that the hot pan will hurt them. They don't know to walk around the hole necessarily. So what you're doing when you're making this choice that you're talking about has a lot to do with memory. And that's okay. I'm fine with that. That's not a dynamic I'm prepared to declare war on. However, it is different than noticing.
And to the baby, hey, it's a hole. Let's get in it and check it out.
Exactly.
Let's get in there. Let's get in that hole.
Exactly. Whereas, why did Donna make the choice to go around the hole? History. She's walked in one before. She knows what holes can do to people's feet. She knows what happens when we sprain our ankles. That's all a type of information, and that's great. Not declaring war on it, but let's not get confused that noticing is a form of raw recognition. The watcher can notice, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's a deliberate act.
Not my garden. Not my garden. And again, that was my example.
Yeah. Sometimes people don't notice that their stomach hurts, or that they have a stomach until it hurts. That's the idea. That wasn't deliberate awareness and attention, though. It's just gotten to the point where it's so loud in your experience, you can't ignore it anymore. And that's what most people are doing with their life experience. They're ignoring it. They're ignoring the moment. They're ignoring their body in favor of thought, in favor of trying to understand, in favor of beliefs. And it is grossly, disproportionately out of balance, and that is the cause of all human suffering. So I'm happy that Donna made the choice Maybe she didn't even need to think about it. Maybe she was in flow and accessed a little bit of universal intelligence, that it is not the most efficient dynamic to walk, to sprain your ankle in the hole. Right, Jerry? That's not the most efficient dynamic, is it?
To do what?
To sprain your ankle in the hole.
Yeah, yeah.
So intelligence could come through as a word called inner guru. Walk around the hole, Donna. And then you walk around it. That make sense?
Yes. Great conversation this morning. It was awesome.
All right. Any other questions? I just have to figure out what is a good thing to call deliberate. The deliberate act, the deliberate attention, other than deliberate attention. Because there's a power behind that. Personal power. No, that's the feeling. I'm describing the feeling of I can. But the feeling of deliberate attention, I don't really have a single word for that. Why not? It does kind of feel like personal power, though, because the ability to direct your attention is an
Could it be
intention of
flow?
will.
Could it be
Flow,
flow?
well, flow is just unobstructed. It's not, it's just movement. It's intelligent movement. It's flow. Flow, we felt flow before, and yeah, that's a good feeling, but that's not necessarily the feeling of the deliberate nature. That will be there in flow for sure. So it's there in flow, but so deliberate nature is there in flow. Deliberate nature is not there when we're out of flow,
But
or we're going away from it.
It feels like you're switched on.
Yeah, but I don't know what to call that.
What would you call that?
I would hate for it to get sensationalized and worshipped
I
down the road.
know. Turned on. No, but it feels like you're, doesn't it? How do you describe that?
It feels like awake. It feels like
You're really, really in it. You're really
present, mindful, and deliberately intending has a particular feeling of deliberate intention. The God factor, the architect degree. Hydrostasy is that feeling of being in that power of the creator, of the architect. When you're sitting, the sweet spot, that would be flow. That would be a mind that is completely unobstructed by its own cognition.
It's because the feeling's longer than just the sweet spot. It's longer.
Oh yeah, peace is much longer than the flow.
When you're feeling the feeling of deliberateness, it's
always a sweet spot. It just doesn't always. That's why I have this perpetuated long-term flow, and then the burst of flow, because we can do both. It's an aperture of flow. But flow just still means no resistance, so we're still not resisting. So you could be sitting very still, doing absolutely nothing as far as anyone else can tell, and you're still in flow. Does that make sense? But sometimes we look at flow the way we talk about it. It's a basketball player dropping 60 points, Sometimes in the world, we need to see something miraculous before we give it any credence. Presence, mindfulness, and then this thing that we call deliberate attention. We seize attention. There's something about the human brain and the human experience that we can recognize our place as the architect. If we just say we understand that and put it back into our brain and go back into thinking, we're not actualizing that. Do you see why I use the word actualizing? Expressing it. The universe is expressing. So are you. And you're either expressing it now or you're not. You're either connected to that expression or you're not. Connected like electricity, can flow. Yeah.
Yeah, presence, mindfulness, connected.
Presence, here I am. Mindfulness. I don't need to necessarily think thoughts about it. However, that does not equal just connected. It equals the watcher. It equals presence. It equals a mind that is currently not judging. but I'm still not engaging the power that helps facilitate that connection. And that is deliberate awareness. That's deliberate attention. Deliberate attention determines connection as opposed to just accidentally. Does that make sense, Jerry? There's a difference. It's because of the third pillar that we make such a profound connection.
Yeah, I was just playing with words. You were saying you were trying to think of a different way to say deliberate.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I call it the architect. I've always called it the architect, the element of the architect, the actualized mind. So Donna could say, I am the whole universe experiencing itself as a human. And then the moment she stops saying that, if she's not feeling it, it's gone. It's just words. And they're currently not happening. But if she feels it, it is actualized. It's a part of her present moment. It's present, mindful, and I'm connecting to it. It's actualized to me.
Presence, mindfulness, conscious.
No, consciousness is the base fundamental constituent of the universe. So I don't really prefer to use the word consciousness as recognition. That's how people use the words. I was conscious of nothing, meaning I was unable to recognize. So I don't prefer to use the word consciousness as a form of recognition. I prefer to use the word consciousness as a form of the fundamental constituent of the universe that is one step removed. It's the first expression, consciousness. I can only talk about expressions of Tao. The first expression is consciousness. That consciousness does not imply recognition. That is an error.
So maybe we don't need to come up with another word for deliberate. It's a pretty good one.
It is a pretty good one, yeah. I don't know if it describes the feel. It does, it actually does. I like the architect, the deliberate creator, actualization. Those are words that I can feel. Actualized, you know what I mean? Like the feeling of peace is actualized. I feel it, it's actual. I don't like the word real because that's a word I'm trying to convince you. It's real. No, I don't need to convince you. It's actual to me. It's actualized. So the actualization is what we're doing in this practice.
Like the alchemist.
The alchemist is transforming. So the alchemist is a person who is transforming one thing to another, typically something to gold. So
would it not just mean you're in the mix of it?
I guess we're fundamentally alchemist as the architect because we're turning things into something else. We're turning wood into buildings. We're turning ideas into creations. We're turning thoughts into things. We're
ingredients into cake.
Ingredients into cake, yeah. So in a way, that is the creative process, and that is what we're doing. What's the word you used?
Alchemy, the
alchemy. Yeah, that is alchemy. We're making the unknown known. That is a form of alchemy. I like that. I would be very careful with that word because that's a buzzword used to catch people's attention. Just like when they put memes and they put fucking Brad Pitt. It's like, Brad Pitt didn't say that. Why the fuck is Brad Pitt in this meme? They keep showing these famous people with these words that they didn't say. And I'm like, what is the association other than I've just captured your attention with a handsome man?
And then, all right, I just went there. I won't say it.
Hey, I had a judgment too. It doesn't serve me. That's an opinion. It just doesn't serve me. Well, no, that's not an opinion. That's an observation. The words are to describe the observation and not necessarily an opinion. I don't feel that's an opinion. I feel that's a principle. Principle is not an opinion.
May I ask a question and get off the subject for a second? Because I know we're getting ready to go.
Yep.
May I ask what you're going to be doing in Chicago? What was your position that you applied or interviewed for?
The position that I interviewed for yesterday is a guest service representative at Blue Green, what's that? Resorts.
Oh, was that a different one you mean? I thought you were out last week.
I also have the dispensary as a potential, Sunnyside, but I don't know if I want to do that. And this other one has presented itself first, so right now that's where I'm at. If Sunnyside comes along, then I'll go do that. But yeah, right now I've accepted the position of guest service representative in a mall in Chicago.
Oh, like when you walk in, you're
Mhm.
the information guy
I'm the information guy, and if you give me
at the kiosk.
at the kiosk, and if you give
You're
me
the kiosk.
and if you give me a
Awesome.
few extra seconds, I'm going to try to sell you a 3 to 7 day vacation. And when you get to the vacation, they're going to try to sell you timeshare. I don't try to sell people timeshare. I would like to give people a vacation.
Well, that is just awesome. And then you're probably going to have some books like sitting down there. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
No, you're not.
Would you? I mean,
This is all a part of the highest vision. I can see myself much more in Chicago with a stand than in Champaign. There's just more potential. There's more people. There's more minds. So there's more connection points. So I do see myself opening up a stand in that mall or outside of the mall, or those newspaper holders that you'd use to deliver newspapers. Yeah, I'll put my books in there and be like, mindfulness, evolution of mind. So I'm no longer going to say the evolution of consciousness. I have to dissolve that out of my vocabulary because it's not an accurate description of consciousness. Consciousness is not necessarily changing over time, even though it is. It's just also not. It is both change and not change. It is both here and there. It is both up and down. And that's why let's not talk about it. Let's just feel consciousness. And that would be the watcher.
but you have always said that the evolution of my consciousness
I
is
know.
my responsibility.
Hey, I've used words that,
It is.
and then I learn more about how I'm using the words, and I choose evolution of mind makes more sense. The evolution of my mind, the evolution of my body. Spirit doesn't evolve. Spirit's infinite. How can something infinite evolve? It's still moving and changing, but it's not necessarily evolving. But then again, it is. So it is, but it isn't.
So you guys are going to be living in a city.
Yes. And so fox walking will get more interesting, I think. We fox walk every day here and we love it. So no part of this move is because we think we need to or we don't like where we are. It's actually, I'm attached to my plants. So this is a little uncomfortable for me because I really like my plants and I like doing that. And I won't be able to do that in an apartment in Chicago. But I'm okay, meeting my attachments because I feel peace. As long as I feel peace, I know I'm good. As long as I'm going towards peace, everything will be just fine. So I don't need to worry. Is this the right decision? Is this the wrong decision? Can we afford it? Can we not afford it? Everything will just be a direction of our attention and the power of our will. And there is no separation between the two when we're in flow. So my recommendation to Shayna, and she's doing it, let's just direct attention. And as long as we're doing that, then we'll be creating consciousness. We'll be creating consciously.
Yeah, you will. You are.
We are. Yeah. So creating with the recognition factor is maybe a better way to say it. Creating with awareness. Consciousness is used too many different places. Even if I'm asleep, I'm still consciousness. But we use the word conscious. That's another usage of the word to mean is the mind on. Do you see what I mean, Jerry? That's not the same usage of the word though. Because my pen is consciousness. But that consciousness isn't necessarily focusing through the lens of a brain, so it's not thinking. There's no memory. There's not human memory, how I would recognize it inside of this pen. Because, yes,
sorry.
no, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was getting into the conversation, just having conversation. Are you going to be going up there first, probably, or
we're going together? No, we're both going to go together. We're going to clean the house out, and then either we're going to list it, but we also have a couple friends that are interested. And houses in our area have just been flying off the market. So I would expect our house to sell within 2 weeks.
And then like, when do they want you to start?
The 18th of April or the 19th of April.
Oh,
So
wow.
we will look at houses and apartments on the 11th. We will sign a lease that week, and then hopefully be in as soon as possible to where I can move in on Monday the 19th and still be able to make it to my orientation. So I have to be able to work the week of the 19th.
Yeah.
So we got to get in there. And so we got to sign the lease pretty quickly.
Yeah.
All
You're
right.
probably going to be up there by yourself for a little bit.
Maybe
Well,
a
no,
day, maybe a week, you know.
Yeah,
or
no, you can close
not
it from
long.
there. You can close it from there.
Yeah,
Yep,
we can
right.
close it from there. And actually, as long as Shane is not living here, then the house stays clean. It looks staged. And I think it will be even easier
I
to
work
sell.
from home, so
And she works from home. Yeah, she's remote.
Oh, you'll still be doing your college job up there.
possibly. I mean,
At least in the beginning.
we don't plan to go back to work until maybe September, and I don't even know if then.